And let's get into what we're talking about tonight. Palo Seco in the house. Blessed night and stay safe. Thank you, Donna Blades from Palo Seco. We're a broken and frustrated country. You're always on point, Mr. Mindful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's get into what we're talking about tonight. All right. So all of the lives are running. Good night and welcome to Mindful Live. We are on Mindful Live number 18. Is it tonight or is it 19? Mindful Live number 19. We are going well. Welcome. Tonight is the 18th of January. And welcome to the Mindful Live. We're starting off tonight talking about our lovely, beautiful Miss World representative who introduced us in a poor way. She introduced us in a poor way. In the figuratively poor and in the literal poor sense also. She introduced us in a poor way in the Miss World competition. She was asked a question about a project that she was running, and her response left quite a few people angry. Now, good night, Sisi. Now, though many people were angry, there were some people who were, on the other hand, not that offended. Some people were actually upset that there were people upset about this. How could you be upset about the Miss World saying this? Because they had the view that she was correct. Trinidad and Tobago is indeed in such a downtrodden and... Did you watch the Venezuela? Oh my goodness, I didn't get around to watching the Venezuela project yet. You know what? DM me that so that it would be fresher in my mind to get around to watching it. DM me that Venezuela project business. But yes, the lady said we are a downtrodden nation basically, and there are still some people all around social media who are defending that statement. They're saying that really and truly, good night, Chinese Douglas. Your dinner got cool waiting. My apologies. My humble apologies. Don't worry. Very soon, we'll be promptly at 9 every night, and possibly by then, the number of people waiting to watch would grow also. So, it would all work splendidly in the future. Yeah, I know you're joking. All right. So, yes, she introduced us as a really poor nation. And some people defended that because they were saying that Trinidad has a lot of poverty, and the difficulties that we see all around Trinidad need to be spoken about. They don't need to be swept under the rug. And when people are trying to silence her for saying these things, what they are effectively doing is silencing the plight of the poor people in Trinidad. Now, I fully disagree with that, because I don't think the poor people in Trinidad required their story being told in front of the millions of people in the audience of a Miss World competition. But Miss World had a statement to say on that. After some of the furor that came out of it, Miss World had a statement she released on it. Never intended to show country in a bad light, says Miss World TNT. I think that should be kind of obvious too. Janine Brandt, this country's representative to the Miss World pageant 2021, has issued a statement in response to the public outcry over her presentation at the global contest on poverty issues in Trinidad and Tobago. The following is the full text of it. On Monday, 17th January 2022, a video clip of my presentation for the beauty. Let me see if I can read it in the proper voice for this. Yes, I came late. Author Malcolm over on Instagram. Apologies. Let me see if I can read it in the proper voice. A video clip of my presentation for the Beauty with a Purpose head-to-head challenge from the Miss World 2021 pageant was circulated on social media platforms. I was asked to present in under 2 minutes my Beauty with a Purpose project to a panel of judges. As the Miss World representative for Trinidad and Tobago, I appreciate the significance of my role. I can and have attested to all the beauty our nation has to offer. However, in this instant, I was asked to present on a societal issue I was passionate and purposed about. Over the past 2 years, I have worked assiduously through my NGO, the Brandt Beauty Foundation, to aid and support underprivileged communities. My intention was never to portray our twin island in a negative light or to bring ill repute to the Miss World Trinidad and Tobago franchise. Now, very noticeably missing from this entire statement was an apology. Clearly missing was an apology. Now, I guess from her perspective, I can understand that. If you don't think you did anything wrong, then you shouldn't apologize. There isn't anything to apologize for. So I guess from this statement, what she's saying is she doesn't see it as something wrong, and it kind of is suggested by what she says. She sees it as she was just highlighting this specific issue, and there's no need to apologize. Somebody in the comments is saying that to apologize for what? Now, I would tell you apologize for what? Apologize for telling lies. For telling lies about the country. Are there thousands of people who do not have access to school, really? Is that what's going on in Trinidad? And yes, poverty does exist in Trinidad. But there are two main types of poverty when we're speaking about poverty. There's absolute poverty, and then there's relative poverty. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do have quite a bit of relative poverty. When you look at the richest people in the country, when you look at the amount of money the country has as an entirety, as a whole, our country is very wealthy. And there are people who do not gain as much from that wealth as they should. They do not get a good portion of the pie. Fine. Fine. I understand that. Good. But when you look at absolute poverty, we had this discussion at the end of the live on the TikTok only portion last night. When you look at the absolute poverty side of this, when you look at the actual people who may be starving, how many babies do you think die of starvation in Trinidad and Tobago because they do not have enough nutrition? I would beg the number is no. Bro, you don't know what you're talking about. So I have read these statistics. When you look at how many people in Trinidad live underneath $1.90 US a day, the percentage of our population is 0%. We have 0.6% of our population living in what is called multidimensional poverty. Now, Sir, Mr. Ifro, if you do not understand what is absolute or relative poverty, then I cannot help you there, and good luck with what you're going to do. But yes, we have 0.6% of our population living in multidimensional poverty. And what that is when they take into account access to education, access to health, and their standard of living, then you would say, no, I will not read your blog if you do not understand what is absolute or relative poverty. No, and then and then you have that 0.6% when you have that characterized by multiple things. But if you look at the specific ability to get food as the day goes by, we do not have that. And now here's where I would have an even further problem with all of this. The further problem I would have with this is when you mischaracterize a problem, you would miss the solution. You see, if we think our problem is poor people growing up and waking up on the cold, bare floor, what we would need in that case would be more resources in our country. Then obviously this country is lacking resources. We need more money in this country. But then if what we actually lack is proper management, and we have too much corruption in our country, so what we actually miss in our country is the proper distribution of our wealth, then by saying things like these children are growing up on the cold hard floor and I went there to make sure they have what is needed, you're mischaracterizing the problem. And then you see, here's where the problem is. And this is where some people will get really angry. And some people may not even be able to point directly to what is upsetting them about this. But there are multiple things in this. When you look at this person who is saying this, and you see that they are obviously from a higher class in this society, and then they speak with the I and the I and the I and what I have done and what I have done and what I have done and I 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 and I, you get the feeling like they're mischaracterizing the problem we have in Trinidad, which is the uneven distribution of wealth, which they may be a beneficiary of, and then they're coming to say that they would distribute that wealth and give the poorer people some of it to really allow them to feel good. That doesn't fly. The mischaracterizing of the problems misses the solution. She not a Rasta, that set of iron. Good night to all, Mr. NFL Malik over on YouTube. As usual, to everyone in the live chats. If you miss bits and pieces of the live or you enter late, like I do, you can catch the majority of the news stories. You could catch the majority of the news stories back again on my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer over on YouTube. Feel free to go over there and subscribe. You can catch the nightly lives there also. And you have the benefit of the news stories scrolling behind me also. All right, let's read some of what the chat is saying. In 1944, the world came together and agreed to make the United States dollar the world dollar. Are you pro-socialism? No, I'm not pro-socialism. And we use the dollar to define poverty. The UN definition of poverty is wrong. Okay. I understand the point you may be trying to make there. Yes, the 1944 Bretton Woods agreement, I believe it was. Sometimes I have to recall in my mind what all of those things are. No, I'm not single. And yes, they decided that they would take the US dollar and put it as the world dollar, basically. Now, it wasn't exactly put as the world dollar, it was put as a relative to gold. That was the thing. They put it as a relative to gold. I believe it was 32 US dollars got you a specific amount of gold, and then they pinned it to gold, and they pinned everyone to the US dollar. So now what that allowed for, is the ability to trade globally better. When you have a common currency, it's easier to trade. That makes sense. Okay, education is free, but most children waste it. She dragged way too much. You're spot on. She was way too self-praised. Yeah. And yes, what eventually happened is eventually the US took their dollar off of being pegged to gold and changed it into fiat currency. So basically what they say their money is worth is what it is actually worth. And that did cause some problems. It allowed them to inflate their dollar, to print it as much as they wanted. And the US is abusing the world by this. I fully agree with this. I've made several contemplations on this. But to say that is an incorrect judge of poverty, I would disagree. It's not saying that anyone who doesn't make that amount of money is automatically poor. It's an average so that around the world we could have a common view to have a general understanding of something. When I say somebody lives on less than $1.90 US a day, you have a general understanding that's $14 TT. And what that means is generally speaking, the relative of what we could acquire for $14 TT, someone who is in extreme poverty lives on less than that. That's all it is stated. I'm not talking about whichever fantastic conspiracies there are further on in that. All right. Now, we're moving on from Miss World. Miss World got quite a few people upset, and I'd say, from my judgment, I would say it's rightfully so. Obviously, some people believe she's correct, and she has all right to insult the country the way she did, and it's freedom to all. If you feel that's the way it should be done, that's cool. Hello to everyone on the live. Hello to you too, South Trini 26 in mass. Good night, King Kaka. What's up? All right. Now we're going on to the protests that happen. And not just the protests in themselves, but we're focusing in now a bit on the tear gas that was released. Tear gas, I said this in the contemplation today. Tear gas is banned from use in warfare. In warfare, it's considered as chemical warfare and it's prohibited. If you use that, you can be brought up on war crimes. Now, personally, I always found the whole concept of war crimes to be patently ridiculous. How could there be crime in war? I'm sorry, I understand it, but I find it ridiculous. I just don't find it makes sense. Okay, I'm not sure what you're saying anymore, Ifru. But yes, I have the concept is lost on me. The concept of war crime is lost on me. So I am here. I am here to conquer your land and to kill you while I'm doing it. But I must do this with ethics. You know, I must be ethical in how I go about killing you. So I cannot just kill your women and children. I can only kill your men, and I can only shoot them. I cannot poison them. And maybe if I'm shooting them, I cannot shoot them in their foot and leave them to bleed out. That would be so unkind. Speaking of, what do you think it's a good idea to be a fighter pilot? Well, it's according to what's your definition of a good idea. If you're talking about adventure, I'd suppose a fighter pilot would have a lot of adventure. Yes. The as I said, the concept of war crimes to me has always kind of been outside of my understanding. It just doesn't make sense. If I'm here to kill you, I'm here to kill you, and I find the means by which it's done seems a bit to be picking in between the straws. It's die, you're going to die. But tear gas is prohibited. You cannot use tear gas in a war. It would be considered a crime. But if you have some citizens who are protesting too much in the streets and you want them to get off of the streets, they're citizens of this country. They may be paying taxes. They are paying the taxes that buy the tear gas to put in the canisters to give the police. They're paying the police salary. And then in that case, though, it's quite fine. Tear gas them. Feel free. Gas them out. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Sure. Dad tried to get boys out of tear gas melee. The father of two young boys who were caught in the melee when police deployed tear gas against a crowd of protesters at the Queen's Park Savannah, Port of Spain, on Sunday, is angry and insisting there was no need for the officers to use such force. Now, to establish this at the very beginning, I'm not justifying any sides, but I don't like how it had kids there. I was going to get on that from the very beginning. Now, let's look at this from several angles. The first point is, what was the event billed as? The event was billed as a health walk. Also included in the health walk was people speaking and protesting about whatever they didn't like about the government's response to this whole virus and the vaccines, etc. But it was a health walk, walking around the savannah. Now, I don't see, from that billing, I don't see why it would preclude you carrying your children there. That seems like something that, if you're into that kind of thing, something that should not have been somewhere you could not carry your child. Now, I could understand, especially in hindsight being 2020, as they say, you look backward and you could see everything very clearly. But I could understand in hindsight, you're saying don't bring children there. I could understand that. But I could also understand in foresight at the very beginning, you're hearing, yes, Nathan is Mr. Arthur Malcolm. Yeah. At the very beginning, when you're hearing the billing as a health walk and you're thinking you're just going to walk around the savannah, some people would hold some placards, etc., then cool. Maybe children could be there. But okay, I would leave it at the point where, thank you, moderators. Thank you very much. It was a little too much now. I would leave it at the point even agreeing the child should not have been there. The children should not have been there. Okay, you should not have brought the children there. And maybe in events where you're protesting something adult, something the children may not even understand fully, possibly bringing them isn't the best idea. But also on the flip side of that, I understand that getting people to care for your children while you go about doing other things is a problem some people face, and the reality is some people carry their children everywhere they go, and if that's where they go, they'd carry their children, and I understand that. But even if the children weren't supposed to be there, even if it was the worst possible place for children to be, I think that is no excuse. Hearing you speak is like writing a Caribbean studies essay. Oh, well, I'm glad I'm able to be of some assistance. And on the other hand, though, even if the children are there where they should not be, how does that excuse the police? You're there. The children are already there. You cannot go back in time and make the children unbe where they are now. You cannot unbring them. They are already here. There's no change that can happen to that. So what are we going to do then? Can't you see that the children would be there? And then if you fire tear gas in such a case, and that's the issue that many people are having. You see, something like tear gas is not something aimed. Okay, the police have said that they don't think it was an excessive use of force. Let me see if I could get where the commissioner came out, and he said it was more than excusable, more than warranted. I don't seem to have that. Yes, tear gas was more than warranted. More than warranted is how Acting Police Commissioner MacDonald Jacob has described the firing of tear gas to disperse an unruly crowd of approximately 300 protesters at the Queen's Park, Savannah, Port of Spain on Sunday. Jacob also said last evening that tear gas is used when people fail to comply with lawful direction and instructions by the police. Now, this piece right here, this statement Mr. Jacob said right here. Jacob said last evening that tear gas is used when people fail to comply with lawful direction and instructions by the police. I found it very fair and very wise the way how the former commissioner brought him up on that very same statement. Maybe we'd get back to the poverty point after in the TikTok only. If you're still here, maybe we'd get back to that, but we're on this now. So, all right, yes, the former commissioner picked him up on that very same kind of thought. If you're saying that when people fail to comply, with, this is Ronnie, yo, what's up, Ronnie? Enough respect to you too. And if you're saying that when people fail to comply, that's when we use tear gas. Okay, fine. Fine, we'd use tear gas in that case, but then we can now evaluate where were the other instances when people were refusing to comply. And the two instances that the former commissioner brought up was at Yassin Abubakar's funeral, the imam. And it was said back then that it was widely known the crowd was way over the limit. But the commissioner back then said he was using, I forgot the exact word. Something to do with tactics. Some kind of tactical something was what he was using. And to be fair to him, I do understand what he is saying. If at the imam's funeral, someone decided to shoot off 3 tear gas canisters, there would have been mayhem. Or if at the Beetham protests, where they blocked off the main road and the highway and the bus route, if they decided to shoot off tear gas canisters, then it would have also been mayhem. But I found this. And yes, someone pointed that out too. Over in Tobago, there were crowds for the elections. Why didn't anyone shoot tear gas into the electoral crowds? Why didn't anyone shoot when the parties were celebrating over in Tobago? There wasn't any of that. So some of this it does fairly seem, from the crowd's point of view, like you're picking on us. You knew that who we are and the position we are in, we couldn't really do anything about it. So monkey know which tree to climb. That seems to be the basis of it. And the fact is, when you're talking about things like the law shouldn't know which tree to climb. Which tree the law climbs shouldn't be dependent on which tree has pick on it, if you understand the analogy I'm drawing. The law isn't supposed to be only climbing the smoothest trees. The law is supposed to be blind. That's why they when they draw or carve or sculpt or whatever this image of the Lady Justice, she is blindfolded. It's supposed to be blind. But apparently the law in Trinidad sees very well when this crowd seems like they take this set of action and this crowd seems like they will not take this set of action, and you react accordingly. And there isn't a problem with reacting according to the crowd. That makes sense. That makes sense. You act according to the crowd. But then in that case, the crowds can justifiably say that you aren't being fair. You aren't being even-handed in this. Now, I saw someone said something about shoot in the air. You can't shoot in the air. Bullets that go up must come down. When I see police officers randomly shooting in the air, I find that to be ridiculous. When that bullet comes down, where is it going to come down? You should not shoot if you're an officer, or if in the event you have somehow a licensed firearm, you should not shoot a target when you don't know where the bullet is going to stop. The bullet has to stop somewhere. It has to, when you shoot off that round, it's going somewhere and it's going to end somewhere. That's the way physics works. It has to stop at some point. And if you just leave it and shoot it into the air and you have no idea where it's going to land, you're setting up for a disaster and a bad idea also. Now, the commissioner said this was standard procedure, and they did this because some people seem to be pelting them with bottles. But here's the interesting thing. When they said people were pelting them with bottles, people were throwing projectiles at them, and that's why they ended up shooting this into the crowd. This was the Express. The Express had reporters there, and their account of how things went was this. The first tear gas canister was fired by an officer to the rear of the front line, and according to the Express relay of the events that happened, they didn't have an account of any projectiles being thrown before the canisters were fired. The canister was fired over the crowd and landed in the Knowsley building compound opposite the Savannah. Then another was fired, landing near the crowd. As it did, people began running in all directions with one water bottle thrown back at the officers, who fired another tear gas canister. So according to the Express, the one water bottle, plastic water bottle, that was thrown at the officers was thrown only after they fired 2 tear gas canisters into the crowd. And here's where the problem even gets worse. Tear gas is better than firing a bullet into the air. But the further problem with tear gas is it's a gas. Who knows where the gas blows? There are multiple people who would be affected by this gas. I read someone who was driving in their car, and them and their children would have been affected. If you were driving in your car and tear gas blew into your car and you crashed, who would have been liable for that? Whose fault would that have been if tear gas got into a vehicle of an innocent bystander? When we look now and tear gas got into these little children's eyes, whose fault is that now? It's a gas. If you shoot the gas and you're saying this one bit of the crowd there is being unruly, so we're going to fire 3 tear gas canisters into that one portion of the crowd. Do you think the tear gas is going to stay in that one portion of the crowd? Really? Is it? Or is it a case where you need to go in there and use your words and discuss and give warnings? And if your warnings are not heeded, then maybe just as they did anyway, because they shot the tear gas and they still arrested 12 or 11 people according to where you read the information from. So what's the point shooting the tear gas to disperse the people and then still arresting 11 of them to disperse them? What's the point? What really is the point? Or is it just that someone had a fresh 3 canisters of tear gas that they never got to use before, and they really wanted to get that feeling, plunk, 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 you know how it sounds when it shoots off? So maybe that's some of it, because I'm sorry, I do not see the sensibility in this. I do not see how this could be excused as being really what was necessary, what was in danger of happening there. When you're shooting this tear gas, I'm supposing it's because you're worried about some kind of danger that someone may be in. What exactly was the danger? But the police asked, then instructed, and then used force. Okay, I understand they went up their use of force procedural ranking, and maybe because of that, no one would be prosecuted for it, and okay, fine. But nonetheless, to say that we did what was necessary, and you have 2 children nursing damage from tear gas when it was a crowd of non-violent protesters, not at risk of damaging any property or hurting anyone else, just because they didn't have a pass to protest. Tear gas, I'm sorry. I don't see that as being super necessary. And although a peaceful protest is allowed by law, you're still required to get permission from the commissioner. Now, what they did is they kind of used around the road, around the law, where they said they're not having a protest. What they were doing is they were actually having a health march. They gathered sporadically and decided to walk around the savannah, and they were socially distanced. So they were using, as it were, technicality. So although the police commissioner is saying they broke a law because they were protesting without a permit, they're saying they were not there necessarily to protest. They were just having a march, a peaceful health walk. I guess it's similar to the technicality of what was the floating restaurant, using technicalities in the law. And that's a normal thing. That's a common thing. Yes, just like the boat restaurant, they were using a technicality. I don't think that's flying on the police side to me. Now, the UNC leader obviously had quite a bit to say about it. She's saying that she wants to know who gave the order to shoot off the canisters. Now, I find this to be a fair question, personally. I think it would make sense to find out where did the order come from. The former commissioner, he spoke, and you know how he speaks. He spoke and he said that his point was that the leader, the commissioner, in such a situation should have been on the ground. As he was back in the Black Lives Matter protests and in the candlelight vigils, he was there on the ground. And the commissioner should have been there on the ground to ascertain what was going on, assess what needed to happen, and make the calls on the ground. And in that case, I think it's fair to let the people know who made the call to shoot off the gas of those tear gas canisters. Was it someone on the ground, or was it someone in a building away? Because if it was someone on the ground, okay, you could ask them what exactly they saw that they thought it was necessary to do this course of action. And if it was someone who was not there on the ground, then you'd have to find out what information they found out that made them think this would have been necessary. And then we'd have to find out if the information was accurate. Now, I find personally, when these kind of things happen, some people act like we don't need to know that. That's not our business. Now, I'd say it bluntly, that kind of thing, the current commissioner is Mr. McDonald Jacobs. That kind of thing is colonial thinking. We do not live in a country where we are just the serfs, we are just the peasants here, and the ruling class says what happens, and we just have to take it. That's not what is supposed to be happening here. We live in a republican democracy. So we're supposed to be able to vote for our leaders, and they are supposed to answer to us. People like the police service, those service-oriented institutions and services are supposed to be serving us. So they're supposed to answer to us. So if 2 children in our nation were exposed to tear gas when they should not have been, or they maybe should have been, I think it's fair to have a public answer as to how this happened. What were the instances, the situations that led up to this decision being made? I think that's a fair question. UNC, tell country who ordered police to tear gas peaceful protesters. Condemning the use of tear gas to disperse peaceful protesters at the Queen's Park Savannah last Sunday, the leader and deputy leader of the United National Congress are calling for a full investigation. Both Kamala Persad-Bissessar and Jerlene John. Now, I just make a note here. This is a side note. To all the feminists out here, I find it very interesting when I read through Trinidad and you see how many high positions in Trinidad are held by women in our country. Both the leader and deputy leader in the UNC, the head of the Police Service Commission, the previous head of the Police Service Commission, or president. Wow, it's just a lot of powerful ladies all around Trinidad. the gender equality is up there. All right. I call for investigations to be done. This is Ms. Prasad Bisesa speaking. I call for investigations to be done to determine where and how and when. Who gave instructions? Is it the same official who say remove the police merit list? Now, Ms. Prasad Bisesa is linking this back. So after instructing the illegal protesters to go home many times, then instructing them to, and they refused, what happens next? What should the police do? Okay, I'll get back into the article. Let me answer this question as far as I think and I could see. They arrested the people that still refused to go away. That's what they did, disobeying a direct police order in that case, because you were protesting illegally. They arrested the people anyway, and I would wager if you arrested those people, the crowd would have dispersed anyway, because that's how they dispersed the crowd. The tear gas wasn't literally what got everyone away. It's when they finished and they arrested all the remainders. That's basically it. You use your words, and who refuses and breaks the law, you arrest the people who break the law. You don't tear gas and allow the tear gas to blow about the capital city. I don't see that as a viable alternative. Tear gas, I think, as far as I could see, would be something in the case of an emergency. Tear gas would be something only in the case of an emergency, where you see that some danger could be happening because of what is happening there. They're at risk of causing some danger. But if they're not at risk of causing some danger, to expose them to the risk of tear gas, because it's not a zero risk. So they remain. If they left, they wouldn't be arrested. Yes, if they left, they wouldn't be arrested. The ones that remained were arrested. Yeah, people, as someone is saying in the chat, people walked back after the tear gas blew away. If the group wanted to stay, when you look at riots all around the world, in order to really use the tear gas, they tear gas and then tear gas and then tear gas, and then the police have to go in there and disperse the crowd. Because if a crowd doesn't want to go, tear gas would blow, they would walk away from where the tear gas is blowing and just come back. In Hong Kong, when they were protesting, they came out, hey, Kayla Martinez, they came out with leaf blowers and were blowing the tear gas away. Tear gas is effective in a limited way, and either way, they'd have to come in to the protest to get the thing done either way. So the tear gas still didn't do what they had intention of it doing. I saw someone is requesting to go live together here. We aren't going live together yet. Once I am on TikTok only, if you do request that, I would click yes. All right. Asserting high officials. Okay, so what Ms. Prasad Bisesa is linking this back to also is she's linking it back to the case where the bit of Bacchanal, where the former commissioner, the former commissioner, he was at the top of the merit list. The merit list went to the president, and it was said that some high official said that, we would call back that list. And she's asking if it's the same person that made the request to stop the commissioner list from going on through the process, if it was that same person who requested that they shoot tear gas into the crowd. And hello, right, just so. Asserting high officials intervened in the removal of the police merit list, she demanded, I am asking, investigate and let the country know who gave that instruction. And hello, before you even went there, you went prepared. That tear gas was taken to the Queen's Park Savannah. That tear gas didn't arrive at the scene. The police went with it. I find Double G Gary Griffith, 2 G's. That's why we say Double G. I find that where was I? I find that to be an interesting question, what she brought up there. Obviously, she's politicking. She's a politician. That's what politicians do, obviously. But the point she's making is that the police went there with the riot gear and with the tear gas already in hand. So they went there with the possibility of engaging in this kind of action anyway. And I would also find it interesting to find out, why did they go there prepared that way. And I would also find it interesting. I would also want to know, were there even riot police present during Abu Bakr's funeral? And someone in the chat is saying a crime is a crime, whether it's small or large. Okay, crimes were going on there. Crimes were going on when the Beetham residents were protesting. So why didn't they do that then? You remember, a crime is a crime, right? A crime is a crime. There's no other mitigating factor. If you're doing a crime, the police need to take action. And in Yassin Abu Bakr's funeral, there was a crowd over 100 people there when the limit was less than 10, I believe. So weren't the police supposed to be letting off canisters like rain, making it rain that tear gas over there? Why didn't they do that? Seeing as a crime is a crime. The guy in the chat saying a crime is a crime. Why do you think they didn't do that? What happened to the crime then? Did the crime stop being a crime then? Or is it only a crime when you see old people, women, and men that you know aren't going to fight back with you, and children, and then you say, ooh, they're doing a crime. I'm going to shoot 3 canisters of tear gas at them for their crime. How does that make sense? Someone explain that to me. So they are wrong. Exactly. They are, and I won't say just that they were wrong then for not shooting tear gas into someone's funeral. I think that made sense then, just as it would have made sense now not to shoot tear gas into a mixed family crowd and say that you were trying to disperse criminals who were breaking the law. No, that does not make sense. That really doesn't make sense. They were wrong when they didn't do the law then, and they were wrong now when they overreached and abused some of their power. That's my view. Obviously, it could be wrong. I could be wrong, obviously. It's quite a possibility, and they could be right in what they did. But as far as I can see, as I'm reading these articles, as I'm seeing the information coming out, I just cannot see how this can line up. It doesn't really make sense to me. And I, as the opposition leader is requesting, I think they should release who gave that order. Because it would be recorded. Someone gave the order, and I would like to know. And I would like to know who gave that order. Okay, Mr. Rashad Globman, or Globeman, however you'd pronounce that. You say I'm wrong on this one. Okay. So, why didn't they break up the funeral? Why do you think they didn't break up the funeral? And why should we be okay as a country with police only enforcing the law and enforcing it to the harshest measure on the least dangerous of people? Why should we be okay with that as a country? The police use more stringent tactics and more stringent measures on the less dangerous and less able people. Why should we be okay with this as a country? This isn't something to celebrate. That's something to really criticize. I don't want to tell the police that, yeah, you're fine using tear gas on old people, women, and children when you are unable to handle crime in hotspot areas. I don't care for that. Leave the people, let them protest. That's not where we're focused now. That's not where we have a problem now. The problem isn't this bearded man walking around the savannah talking about vaccine thoughts and vaccine conspiracies. That's not where Trinidad has a problem. If they took the protest to the beach. Interesting question. All right. That's the police. And I don't think we should be surprised by the uneven action of our police. That's generally what they do. Now, there's a problem happening in modern times. There's a problem happening just because of the movement of technology, the advancement of technology, and the advancement protesting under a socialist government. That's not really possible. And the advancement of technology, it causes obsolescence of some jobs. No, I didn't feel an earthquake. I don't know what you're talking about there. So if riot police were there, why they still had fully armed police in the car? Yeah. We're moving on now to the job market. What happens as technology progresses is very often people are left off. When technology When technology, that's actually very correct, like here for sure. When technology progresses, lots of people lose their jobs. As technology progresses, where would have had manual labor, now technology has moved on and that manual labor has left. And some people are worried, some people are very worried that eventually what is going to happen is technology may move to a point where you may not need any kind of manual labor. And that's kind of scary. That's where you hear people talking about, I don't know how many of you have heard of UBI, Universal Basic Income, where you'd basically give like social assistance kind of way, social welfare, food cards, that kind of thing. You give everyone in the country that kind of thing. You give everyone, let's say, $7,000, $8,000 a month for them to survive, and they go on with that. Evening, interesting, always like this interesting in the chat. Yeah. And we are facing some of that here. Some of the problems that we are facing with that would be in TSTT. TSTT has been announcing some of their problems they are facing, and some bacchanal seems to be brewing with it. A matter of survival. TSTT to meet unions on a way forward. Telecommunications company TSTT says it urgently needs to restructure to remain competitive. As such, it has written to its employees, its employee representative unions, inviting them to consultations regarding a proposed refinement of its operating or business model. Now, here's where some of the problem is with that in Trinidad. The problem in Trinidad is Trinidad has a very bloated public service market. And because of that, many people within that kind of employment sector have the belief that I am supposed to have this job. It doesn't matter the value I put out. And that's one of the difficulties when the government has a lot of employees. A lot of the government employees are very far separated from the value they create as to the value they're paid. So when you're there in a government building and all you do is input some names into a database system, you can't really tell what value that provides to someone else. So you can't really tell the value you're supposed to be paid. And because of that, we have some missing value in our system. And that's a whole other discussion there. But TSTT is having some problems. In a statement issued yesterday, TSTT CEO said, given our current challenges, TSTT considers that it must now urgently restructure to remain competitive. We must move to an operating model that is more in line with industry benchmarks and which gives us the ability to adapt and evolve with the constant developments in technology. This is our only option if we are to return to profitability. Simply put, there is a new normal in our industry, and TSTT considers that it has no choice but to adapt to it. Therefore, in keeping with the terms of our collective agreements, well, they must speak to the employees. So, what are some of these problems that TSTT is facing? The government of Trinidad and Tobago is the largest employer. Yes, that is true. The government is responsible for 80% of export income. Wow. So here are some of the problems that TSTT is facing. Obviously, there are the problems with the pandemic and the economic situations that the pandemic has created. This, coupled with the increased consumer adoption of digital applications like WhatsApp and communication platforms like Zoom, has seen the steady erosion of traditional voice revenue it added. So WhatsApp and things like Zoom cutting away the people money. You see, when you have free calls on WhatsApp and you could do a video chat over on Zoom, the amount of actual phone calls you'd be making seriously decreases. Seriously decreases. So that alone has cut into their voice market. That would be interesting if someone in TSTT could release that figure, like the amount of voice calls that were made, say, 10 years ago, and the drop we have seen progressing in the last decade. That would be very interesting. They're taking it back in data charges. Well, they're certainly trying. For years, they're digging out people are good. To some extent, I fully agree with that. And it's the market. If you cannot keep competitive to the market, well, you'd be seen as redundant and you'd fall out of it. So yes, WhatsApp and Zoom, WhatsApp and Zoom licking up the people business model. In TNT, fixed voice calling in terms of minutes and calls have declined by 50%. Well, I was just asking for this. Over the past 10 years, and mobile voice calling has declined by 20% in the same period, according to the annual TAT market reports. 50% decrease. In addition, the legacy costs associated with redundant technology in its existing operating structure continue to have a crippling impact on TSTT's business and its result, the company noted. So, in order to maintain all of this old technology and the landlines, etc., to maintain it costs even more than to do some of the new technology too. So they're losing money because people are tuning in more to the new technology, and they're not gaining as much money because it's costing more and more to maintain what they're using, the equipment they're using to maintain their old technology. All right, the material decline, all right, they lost quite a bit of money. Revenue fell 453 million in the last financial year. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Regionally and internationally, it's added, networks are under pressure. Internet traffic is growing exponentially, but the price per gigabyte is declining almost as rapidly. And the result is a downward pressure on revenue growth and margins. Listen, I have no problem in this. I love it. The internet use is going up. They're using way more internet than they used to, and the amount that you have to pay, the price you have to pay to use that increased amount of internet is decreasing. I can tell you all about this. I was on the internet in the earlys. I was one of those really early internet users in Trinidad and Tobago, where you had that dial-up going for quite some time. What's that, by the way, there, J. Cruz? Yes, my phone has some charge today. Yes, I was part of that old dial-up era. I know how it goes. And back then, it was expensive and it was slow. What is happening progressively is we are getting faster internet. We are getting back in the dial-up days, you could have bought 20 hours of internet per month. And when you get 20, listen, when you have slow internet, to load a page is nearly an hour already. So maybe 20 hours of internet, you get to load 20 pages for the month. If you leave your internet on for one day, you've used up all your internet usage for a month. That's what TSTT was doing us back in the day. 20 hours. And if you could upgrade, you'd get a 50-hour dial-up. And maybe you could upgrade someone, you get a 100-hour. And you won't believe how quick 100 hours finishes on internet use, especially when you're using slow internet. And back then you're trying to download a game. And you click to download that game, and the game tells you, we have 300 days remaining. Internet was just so slow. It was ridiculous. It really was. But now that is switching around. The internet is getting a lot faster and it's costing less. So by reducing the US dollar value of wages, yeah, it was some pain. All right. Where was I? Speaking about TSTT's losses and the increase in internet use. Further, TSTT said it has had to focus on aggressively managing its expenses over the past year as these trends intensified, more so than its competitors who have global cost economies of scale. So TSTT is only over here in Trinidad, so they have to maintain what they're costing. But on top of that, they have expenses every year. So while they're making less and less money, their expenses aren't going down. And that's why they want to meet with some of their workers. They want to meet with their employees to get a discussion going. Maybe some employees would have to go. Maybe some employees would have to take a lesser job and a lesser pay. But I stopped listening to you from yeah. some people some people may have to get a lower level of pay, but it may be what needs to be done. And that is what TSTT is speaking about. They're saying that that's what they need to get done right now. They need to meet with the employees, get that discussion going, and make some changes. Ultimately, I think because of how our labor market goes, that's going to be difficult for TSTT. Just as we're seeing how difficult it is for the government to do something like their vaccination policy, it would also be difficult for TSTT to get whatever they want to be done, because we have a powerful labor union group. We have quite a few powerful labor unions, and that's how they work. So it's a difficult position TSTT would now find themselves in. You have to try to get that cost down, but the labor unions would want to hear nothing about that. So how do you balance that? That's where the negotiation comes in. Okay, all right. So in that case, you could understand then why some people, if you look over in the US, one of their former presidential candidates, Mr. Andrew Yang, he's one of the fiercest promoters of this. He wants to introduce universal basic income. Now, here's the idea. When most things become automated, you'd still have resources being made. You'd still have all the necessary resources for all the how much ever billion people on earth being made. What's going to be difficult is it's going to be difficult for someone to do something to create value for someone else that they would pay them for it. Because that's what a work is. That's what a work in a free market is. I am doing something for you that you find valuable, and in return, you show me back or give me back some of your value in exchange for it. And money, in this case, money is a way for us to transport that value over time, right? So I could do something valuable now, but now is fleeting. Let's say this live has some value to everyone here, all 57 people on the TikTok live, all 4 currently on the Instagram, and how many ever on the YouTube. It has some value to you, but when it's done, it's done. The value ends with it there. And maybe I cannot carry that value anywhere else because it's done there. But maybe now, if there was some way for you to pay me and everyone in the chat gives me an... I figured you were iFro like here for sure. That was kind of obvious to everyone. I figured that quite a while ago. But yeah, if you can then give me some resources, and I would be able to take these resources and represent my value now and carry it over time. So tomorrow I can go and show that, hey, I created value yesterday and this is the proof of it. And that's what the money is. But in the case when too many things... I just saw the notification and I couldn't help but break up there. But yeah. When too many things become automated, when everything out there becomes automated, and it's difficult. So a taxi driver, he cannot offer his service of driving a car to give you some value because cars are automated. You do not need a driver, the car can drive itself. So what happens then? The taxi driver has no way of earning a living. Nearly everything in manual labor, almost any worker inside of the food industry, that could be automated. A lot of construction, that could be automated. And you'd have the owners of whatever machines are doing the job, and they may be super rich, but how do you get resources to the other people? How are you able to produce something then in an ecosystem like that, in an economy or a market as such? How are you able to produce something that people find valuable? Yes, sewing can be automated. Sewing is already automated. So, and custom designs, listen, there would very likely very soon be a computer where you can go on the computer, draw up a custom design on the computer, and the computer prints it out for you. the computer sews out whatever the custom design is. That is very possible. That possibly could already be done now. It's just a matter of having the resources. Yes, so many jobs can be automated, and once they're automated, what happens next? What happens next? And that's where some people come in with the UBI. Now, I am kind of the belief. I don't think it would be as easy to automate humans out of the job market as some people think. What humans are able to do, even the simplest of humans, what they are able to do is kind of unrivaled. And I think there would always be people who would prefer getting services from other people. And that's what keeps an economy going. If people want to get a service from another person, the economy would keep growing. So I am not sure if UBI would be the solution. And then the other part of it is I also think that people need motivation. I think if you just allow people to stay home and give them enough resources to live, you would end up with a lot of depressed people and you'd end up with people dying. So I don't actually think UBI is the solution. I think the solution is creating a kind of market that always needs people to do something inside of there. People would always have a function if you want it to be as such. The problem is that it would give tech companies too much power though. Yes, it will. It will centralize power and authority, and we do not want that. All right. I have reached the hour mark over on YouTube, and that's all for YouTube now. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained, and peace out to YouTube. Thank you for joining.